Why don't we pivot now to Earth Day and to what we've called Earth Day principles, the principle of stewardship and sustainability. And I asked Erin to sort of kick this off by just highlighting a few data points research from a major project we did with them, which was part of the State of the American Traveller in November. That looked at how American travelers think about issues of overcrowding, over-tourism, sustainability, etc., and also how DMOs look at this. So, Erin, why don't you kick us off in terms of these Earth Day principles?
Yes, on the eve of Earth Day, let's look at the future of travel as a sustainable brand and what consumer sentiment is going to dictate about its evolution. All right. This data, as Chris mentioned, it comes from our fall 2019 edition of the State of the American Traveler Study, based on a survey of 2,000 American leisure travelers, which we've conducted quarterly since 2006 and in partnership with Miles. Always wonderful to work with you on this, Chris. All right. So largely over the course of the past 2 decades, tourism has been widely and deeply valued, seen as a contributor of good in the world, important to wellness, and even on par with spending time with friends and family as a prioritized leisure activity. Looking at how tourism is viewed internally within communities, nearly a third of Americans agree that tourism makes their community a better place to live. Half feel it is important to their local economy, and 45.2% say they enjoy interacting with visitors to their community. But before COVID-19, there were issues raised and concerns being felt amongst consumers about travel and tourism that were challenging its status as a force of good in the world. And these were perceptions of excess, perceived impacts on the environment, and the impacts of climate change. So on excess, back in late 2019, 18.8% of Americans felt that they had lived in an area with over-tourism, and urban residents feeling this more. So while not widespread, those that felt they lived in an over-touristed area largely considered these issues to be serious. Over-tourism is clearly a complex issue, with Americans assigning blame to high season demand, population gains, increase in hotel and Airbnb supply, and even advertising and social media attention. So looking externally, over half of traveling consumers in the US say if a destination is perceived as having over-tourism, they are less likely to visit. Nearly 1/3 feel they have experienced a destination with over-tourism issues in the last few years, and 46.3% say these issues make them less likely to visit that place again. A longer tail impact, 63% of these travelers have told others about that destination's over-tourism problems, with 45% taking the further step of actually recommending that their friends and family avoid those destinations. Moving on to perceptions of travel as having a negative impact on the environment. In late 2019, 15.8% of Americans felt that people should generally not travel long distances via air because it is bad for the environment. However, when we look at responses to this question by generation, we see a clear divide. Younger travelers, who will soon become the most significant in terms of volume and spending, are more conscious of the environment and thus thinking about travel's impact on it more. And overall, 69% of American travelers believe that people traveling for leisure has an overall negative impact on the environment. But fully a quarter of Gen Z and 1 in 5 millennials believes this. 1 in 5 of all American travelers reports usually or always thinking about the impacts on the environment of their travel, with, again, this being more prominent amongst younger travelers, as you see here, particularly with Gen Z. What trip takers are largely thinking about in terms of their environmental impacts of their travel are plastic waste and carbon emissions. Through the lens of climate change, just under 2/3 of American travelers believe human activity is responsible for climate change, although again, belief is higher with younger Americans compared to older. When asked to use a 10-point scale to rate how climate change has impacted their leisure travel in the past few years, just over half say it has had any impact, and relatively few say it had significant impact. However, as travelers look out over the next 5 years, they anticipate an increased impact of climate change on their leisure travel. These changes are most commonly anticipated in the cost associated with travel and the how, the where, and the when. But back to the present, it's quite interesting to see the alignment of these issues with some of those of the coronavirus impact. So I was sharing some quotes from travelers about how they will change their travel when the pandemic is over. And you'll see that there's wanting to avoid places where a lot of people go and being in smaller travel parties, which will have less impact. If we advance one more, I just also want to bring this chart up again. As you might recall from a few minutes ago, I shared that many American travelers say they are going to avoid crowded places and places that they perceive as having sanitary or hygiene problems in the post-COVID-19 period. So the issues that I've covered today are, I think, solvable, but they do need to be addressed in order to keep the brand of travel healthy and humans reaping the benefits of it into the future.